Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. As the federal Liberals roll out their fall fiscal update, opposition parties say more needs to be done to help struggling Canadians. The public inquiry into the Emergencies Act continues in Ottawa, with various organizers of the Freedom Convoy taking the stand. We have an update from lawyer Eva Chipiuk. And the Better Business Bureau has a new enhanced tool to help those who've been the victim of a scam. We have the details.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Canada's finance minister has tabled her mid-year budget update. Now, the government is projecting a deficit of $36.4 billion. It also includes new spending of $30.6 billion over the next 6 years. The fall economic statement focused heavily on driving investment to the country's clean energy industries. The update also included a new tax on corporate stock buybacks to encourage companies to invest in their own operations. Minister Freeland is also introducing new tax incentives to aid in the growth of clean energy. She says her government is also focused on helping first-time homeowners with a new tax-free first home savings account.
That will make it so much easier to save for a down payment. And we're delivering with a doubling of the first-time home buyer's tax credit to help cover the closing costs that come with buying that first home of your own. We are permanently eliminating interest on the federal portion of Canada student loans and Canada Apprentice. We're working to make sure that families don't need to choose between taking their child to the dentist and putting food on the table. We're creating a new quarterly Canada Workers Benefit to deliver advance payments and put more money sooner into the pockets of our lowest paid and often most essential workers.
Now, during question period earlier today, an Ontario Conservative MP blasted the Trudeau Liberals on the current high cost of living, outlining that record numbers of Canadians are now going to food banks.
I think these Liberals need to be honest with Canadians. They're benefiting from inflation. While record numbers of Canadians use food banks, they're raking in record revenues. But their greed knows no bounds, Mr. Speaker. They want more and more of Canadian dollars. When will these cold-hearted Liberals finally show some compassion, give Canadians a break, and pull their tax hikes off the table?
Benjamin Dichter says he helped to promote and coordinate the cryptocurrency fundraisers for those involved in the Freedom Convoy last February. Dichter is testifying at the Emergencies Act inquiry about his involvement with a convoy that blockaded streets in Ottawa last winter. He says he came to Ottawa with the goal of ending pandemic-related mandates and spreading a message of peace, love, freedom, and unity. Two other Freedom Convoy organizers, including Medicine Hat's own Tamara Leach, were also scheduled to appear at the public inquiry. Now, the inquiry also revealed today that millions of dollars raised by the Freedom Convoy ended up in an escrow account or was returned to donors. The Public Order Emergency Commission is investigating what happened to roughly $25 million worth of donations made through e-transfers, cryptocurrency, and fundraising platforms such as Give, Send, Go and GoFundMe. A report released by the Commission today shows that around $1 million of the money was spent by the convoy's various organizers, where around $18 million was refunded to donors. Lawyer Eva Chipiuk with the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms is in Ottawa for the public inquiry, and she joins us now. She's there representing the Freedom Convoy supporters. Eva, let's talk about some who recently took the stand, including Tom Marazzo, who many would argue was one of the earlier organizers, and lawyer Keith Wilson. What did they have to say at the public inquiry today?
With Mr. Wilson, Keith Wilson, he was one of the lawyers on the ground together with me. So we were right in the middle of lots of the negotiations and dealings with both the city officials and the police throughout our time here. You know, coming into Ottawa, that was not something that we imagined we would be doing. We expected to be in court dealing with injunctions, but our role quickly changed, and he had an opportunity to really expand on that. Mr. Marazzo, Tom Marazzo, similarly talked about how his role expanded into basically turning into a negotiator and a communicator, because there was nobody on the ground talking to anyone, and that morphed into our role and Tom Marazzo's role.
Now, Medicine Hat's Tamara Leach is also taking the stand today and tomorrow. What information will she share as one of the organizers of the Freedom Convoy?
Well, more of the truth. You know, for the last 9 months, we've seen the truth just crumble. And that's been unfortunate. That's been quite an unfortunate piece of the mainstream media narrative. And honestly, that's going to start crumbling down here very quickly. That's already started. The narratives and the lies that were spun right from before the convoy even got to Ottawa, and then throughout Ottawa, and then since. I'm really looking forward to Tamara Leach taking the stand and having her opportunity to really set the record straight.
Thanks so much, Eva. That was Eva Chipyuk, lawyer with the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, joining us from the public inquiry into the Emergencies Act taking place in Ottawa. Calgary Pastor Tim Stevens from Fairview Baptist Church, who is charged with violating public health orders regarding physical distancing during the COVID-19 pandemic, was acquitted in Alberta Provincial Court on Monday. In a statement, the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, which represented Stevens, said Pastor Stevens was illegally arrested and imprisoned for 21 days for having allegedly violated public health orders, which have shown to be ineffective and harmful. This decision sets the record straight about the justifiability of his actions and about the importance of respecting charter rights and freedoms. Well, we had some sunshine mixed with cloud today and a lot cooler here in Lethbridge. Jeanette Roche is in now with an early peek of the forecast. Jeanette, will we get back to above zero again anytime soon?
Yeah, well, you know how the high today was forecasted to be 2 degrees. We didn't quite make it there. We were hovering more in the minuses this afternoon and then finally crept up to 1 degree. Same thing for tomorrow. We're looking at a high of 5 degrees, so hopefully we will make it. Overnight this evening, we're looking at a low of -4 with wind gusts up to 40 kilometers per hour. Into Friday, those gusts are going to continue up to 60 so it's going to be a windy one, but sunny and hopefully a high of 5 degrees. We'll see if we get there. I'll be back later on in the show to let you know how the rest of the week and the weekend is going to shape up. It's going to get much colder, so let's brace for that.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Wednesday's huge dump of snow in our city made for some slick driving conditions on the roads in and around the city. Lethbridge police say they had about a 50% increase in the number of calls coming into the Collision Reporting Center. Police say the increase is on par with most of the other major snowfalls we've received in the past.
It's fairly consistent from year to year with the first snowfall and first bad weather. Just getting drivers back into the rhythm, I guess you could say, of being aware of the conditions and having to slow down. I would say the biggest tip would be aware of your surroundings, meaning obviously if it's snowing, if the roads look icy, they probably are icy. But with that comes be prepared to give yourself extra time.
The LPS is also reminding drivers with the snow and icy covered roads to slow down and ensure that your vehicle has winter tires on it. A new and enhanced tool to help out those who've been scammed has been unveiled. The Better Business Bureau of Southern Alberta announced the launch of the enhanced scam tracker that will help people learn about scams, report them, and learn how to not fall victim to fraudsters. Officials from the BBB estimate that Scam Tracker has saved North American consumers more than $31 million last year alone.
You know, we know that a lot of people don't report the scams that they bump into. Only about 5% of people report. But why it's so important to report them is because then your friends know, your family know, your neighbors, whatever, your colleagues. And that's a part of an education process to become knowledgeable about what to watch out for in terms of scams. And as we know at this point, we have to all become knowledgeable about scams because they're happening every day.
Now, Scam Tracker was originally launched by the BBB in 2015, but now consumers have the option to easily report scams through a desktop or phone. A new report outlines the grim stats of child poverty here in Lethbridge. A report from the Social Health Equity Network of Lethbridge and area says poverty remains a big issue here in our city. In 2019, over 15% of children and youth in our region were living in low-income households. Child poverty rates were highest for children living in single-parent households and Indigenous homes. Sharon Yannicki, the spokesperson for Shenla, says this is a huge issue in our city that needs to be addressed. She also cited a Calgary report that said in 2012, the cost of poverty in Alberta was estimated to be between $7 and $9.5 billion per year. Adjusted for inflation, the cost of poverty in 2022 would now be between $8.4 and $11.4 billion a year.
And so we need to understand that poverty is having impacts and costs across the healthcare system, social services, across policing, across all sorts of sectors in our society. And so it's not just the cost of helping people who are on social assistance. It's a cost that we bear, all of us bear, across the whole system.
Yannicki says in Lethbridge, a living wage is currently at $19 an hour, while minimum wage is sitting at $15 an hour. The Holy Spirit Catholic School Division won a national award for excellence during the 2022 Bravo Awards Gala. Now, the event was hosted by the Canadian Association of Communicators in Education. The division was one of 33 applications under the Communications Project category. Anisha Gatner, the communications coordinator for the division, says they feel very lucky to have won the award.
We work really hard, and I was so fortunate because the team that I worked with on this particular project, we were very collaborative, and we were always really parent focused. We were always really trying our very best to do things that would improve and make things easier for parents. They were definitely our target audience for this. And so to be able to have that project reviewed by other communications professionals and for them to say, not only is this good work, but this is excellent work, it's really quite an honor.
Gatner says they plan to continue that hard work well into the next year. Thousands of mourners gathered at the Richmond, BC Olympic Oval to pay their respects and say their final goodbyes to Constable Shaylin Yang. She was a BC RCMP officer who was stabbed to death while on duty on October the 18th.
Shaylin Yang was always a hero. Her whole life was dedicated to helping others, from the community she served, to those in need, to her cousin going through a tough first year of university. All of us, all her family and friends who've loved her and have been so proud of her, we've always known this. And now all of Canada and Taiwan and the whole world can join us in knowing this too. Everything she did was defined by her empathy, her compassion, and her belief that she could change the world.
The province of Saskatchewan is creating a new marshal service. It'll be made up of 70 officers who will help other law enforcement across the province, including the RCMP and municipal police forces. Officials say their duties will include responding to areas with high crime rates, arresting people on outstanding warrants, and investigating farm-related offenses such as theft or trespassing. Minister of Public Safety Christine Tell says the Marshal Service will strengthen current law enforcement across the province. Ontario Premier Doug Ford says 55,000 education workers left him no choice but to use legislation to quash a strike. The government is trying to pass a bill that would impose a contract on the workers represented by the Canadian Union of Public Employees and ban them from striking. They would also receive steep fines if they did not comply. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says his government is concerned about Ontario's decision to move forward with a notwithstanding clause.
I think it's an important moment for all of us to stand together and say we will defend Canadians' rights and freedoms, because the preemptive use of the notwithstanding clause to suspend people's fundamental rights and freedoms, including workers in this case, is something that we should not see in Canada.
Regardless of the legislation by the Ontario government, CUPE has said its members will begin a strike on Friday until further notice. The Ontario Public Services Employees Union, meanwhile, says its 8,000 education workers will also walk out at the same time in a show of solidarity. A senior officer on the newest U.S. Navy aircraft carrier says the ship stop in Halifax, Nova Scotia, signals the value of working closely with allies in times of international tension. Captain Paul Lanzalota, the commanding officer of the USS Gerald R. Ford, said the carrier completed training exercises with NATO warships during its inaugural mission in the North Atlantic.
This port visit is special for us because it's the first one for USS Gerald R. Ford, in terms of its being an international port visit. We've pulled into our local ports several times over the course of our ship's history, but this is the first time we've sailed away from our home waters and visited an international port. and for that reason it holds a special place in our hearts. As well, I guess Halifax is a sister city to Norfolk, which is our home port, and so that's a special tie as well. The U.S. naval aircraft carrier represents a few different things. One is power projection, the capability to put these aircraft that you see around me wherever we need them to go over long ranges for operations like strike warfare. The physical presence of the ship, along with our allies, shows our partnership. It shows how tight we are. It shows that we're committed to peace, stability, and a conflict-free Atlantic region.
You know, Remembrance Day is just around the corner now. It's a time we honor so many soldiers and veterans who have fought for our freedoms. Jeff Alden served in the Canadian military for over 20 years. He's also the manager of the Lethbridge branch of the Royal Canadian Legion. I asked Mr. Alden why it seems that the Canadian military is having a difficult time recruiting young people to join the armed forces right now.
We do a lot of civil power service now, and that's not really what I think a lot of our young men and women want to do. I know my main reason, we all say it's to serve our country, but ultimately we all got in because we wanted the excitement of travel and adventure and a challenge to our lifestyle. This new policy that the Canadian Forces has adopted with, I'm not a racist or bigot or anything like that, but you simply cannot allow the common soldier to do what they want, look how they want, dress how they want, and expect them to have the discipline to go into battle and follow order.
Jeff Alden will also explain where the Remembrance Day ceremony will be taking place here in Lethbridge. He'll have details coming up later in our broadcast. Well, so nice to see the sunshine again today, but it was also quite chilly here in southwestern Alberta. But fortunately, a warming trend is on the way, but only for the short term. A full look at the weather picture is coming up. Well, the snow has stopped, but the cooler temperatures have remained here in southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Rocher is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, we may see a bit of a warming trend before more moisture arrives in time for the weekend.
Yeah, Hal, Friday and Saturday should be plus days before we head back into the deep freeze. So we're looking at a high of 5 degrees on Friday, 60 km/h winds, lots of sunshine into Saturday, high of 4 degrees, but we are looking at a 60% chance of shower. So there's the moisture, and it's going to stick around for a while too. Into Sunday, we're looking at periods of snow and the temperature dropping drastically, -8 there on Sunday, the high of -12 only on Monday with snow as well. 60% chance of flurries for both Wednesday and Tuesday, but -14 on Tuesday, -12 on Wednesday. So yeah, definitely, even though the calendar says it's still autumn, it's definitely going to start to feel like winter. Average high for this time of year, 8 degrees, average low, -4. High temperature on this day back in 1962, 22 degrees. -16 was where we were at back in 1991. Sun rose this morning at 8:23 a.m. and the sunset this evening, 6:07 p.m., giving us under 10 hours of daylight, so about 9 hours and 44 minutes. So on the west coast, we're looking at chance of showers. Rain expected in Victoria tomorrow, 14 degrees the high and high winds up to 60 km. 12 degrees the high in Vancouver. Vancouver also a rainfall warning in effect, could see 20 to 30 millimeters of rain. 5 the high in Edmonton and 3 the high tomorrow expected in Calgary with partly cloudy skies. Okay, in Saskatoon, lots of sunshine, 1 degree though, up to 3 degrees the high for Regina tomorrow. Lots of sunshine as well. Clear skies tomorrow in Winnipeg expected with a high of 5 degrees. Now, the funny thing about these 3 cities, they're the only place in the country that are having wind chill warnings in the morning, only the -teens, and also UV index in the afternoon. 20 the high in Toronto. Same thing for Montreal tomorrow, high of 19 in Ottawa. Going to be lovely in the central part of the country. As for Atlantic Canada, also not too bad at all. 19 the high in Fredericton, 20 the high in Halifax, 17 in Charlottetown, and an expected high of 12 degrees tomorrow in St. John's, Newfoundland. Not too bad at all. There you go. That's your forecast.
Are you tired of high energy bills? Today's weather report is brought to you by Ridge Utilities, providing competitive rates for electricity, natural gas, and internet while investing back in communities across southern Alberta.
The federal government released its mini budget today, projecting a deficit of $36.4 billion for the current fiscal campaign. Overall, the mini budget proposes modest new spending of $30.6 billion over the next 6 years amid growing political pressure to demonstrate fiscal restraint. Now, the mini budget also included measures to make life a little more affordable, such as permanently eliminating federal interest charges on student loans. Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter is raising questions about the Trudeau government's use of the social media platform. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says they will continue to monitor the situation and find the best way to communicate with Canadians.
I think there's a lot of people reflecting on the best way to continue to connect with citizens. People spend a lot of time on social media. They get much of their news and information from social media, and the government will continue to make sure that we're sharing what we're doing and making sure that people are getting the facts on issues. We will continue to evaluate how we choose to communicate with Canadians.
The technology behind electric vehicles has come a very long way. Now, that's according to William York, who is the director of the Electric Vehicle Association of Alberta. York says when it comes to charging your EV, it's a lot quicker now.
In the early days of electric vehicles in the 2012 era, the most a battery could accept was about 100, 150 kilowatts. Now we're seeing batteries that can accept up to 350 kilowatts. Now, I realize this is electrical speak, so when you're at a fast charging station, that's the difference from staying there for about 30 minutes down to about 5 to 10 minutes. So the amount of time that you have to spend charging at a fast charger is going dramatically down.
William York will also discuss the range of electric vehicles during the colder winter months here on the prairies. That Q&A is coming up after business news. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 35 points on the day to finish at 19,241. The Dow was down 146 points to 32,001. The S&P 500 was down 39 on the day to 3719. And the Nasdaq was down 181 points to 10,342. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $1.83 to 88.17 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 29 cents to 5.98 US. Gold was down 8 cents to 16.2942 US an ounce, and silver was even on the day at 19.47 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $12.90 per bushel, barley's at $9.90, canola's at $20.34, and corn is at $12.11 per bushel. Live cattle were up 55 cents to $151.95. Feeder cattle were down 93 cents to $178, and lean hogs were up 8 cents to $83.38. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 72.76 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the public inquiry into the Emergencies Act revealed that millions of dollars raised by the Freedom Convoy ended up in an escrow account or was returned to donors. The Public Order Emergency Commission is investigating what happened to roughly $25 million worth of donations made through e-transfers, cryptocurrency, and fundraising platforms such as GiveSendGo and GoFundMe. Remembrance Day is just around the corner as we honor those who fought and died for our freedoms. Coming up, an interview with a former soldier who discusses what Remembrance Day means to him, and he'll also give us his thoughts on the current war taking place in Ukraine. Watch for my interview shortly with Jeff Alden, manager of the Lethbridge Royal Canadian Legion. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you. Remembrance Day, lest we forget. You know, it's a time to remember the many sacrifices paid by our soldiers to allow us to enjoy the freedoms we have today. It's also a time to review how our society and government treats our veterans and their families. Joining me now to talk about it is Jeff Alden, manager of the Lethbridge Royal Canadian Legion and a gentleman who spent some time in the military. Jeff, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you.
Now, when you were in the military, why did you first decide to enlist in the armed forces? And you were in the Army, correct? What really inspired you to join?
Well, I was right out of high school. I had been offered a scholarship at a local college where I was from to basically play football. But I didn't like the idea that I would have to take certain programming in order to play football. It was not a way ahead for me. So I talked to my dad, and he took me down to, of course, I was only 17 at the time. He took me down to the recruiting center, and I signed up for the military. Initially, I signed up because I wanted to join and be, at that time, called a SARTEC. So it was like basically a medic that could go anywhere. But I couldn't go directly into it, so I had to join the artillery.
So explain how far you got in the military.
Once I went through 26 years, several postings, Germany for 6 years, and all over Canada, different posts, training officers and all kinds of stuff. And I actually met my goal, which was to become a BSM and to be posted out here to Lethbridge at the local unit at the time. So I retired out here as the RSM from the unit, and with 26 years service.
Well, that's incredible. Congratulations, and thank you so much for your service. We really appreciate it, Jeff. Let's talk a bit about Canadian military and how well they're respected around the world.
The Canadian military is, as far as other arms go, we're compatible with like New Zealand, Australia, because we have the sort of the training philosophies that are the same. We fit in with the Americans, but the Americans are they throw a lot of numbers at things and not so much, think for yourself attitude. It's more, really, it is a soldier type atmosphere. We tell you what you do, you go do it. And the Canadian and the Commonwealth armies more of a think for yourself type attitude. Therefore, we have a stronger leadership base at a lower level. And it works very well in training with the other arms, because the respect comes in the fact that a corporal in our army is about equivalent to a sergeant in some of the other armies as far as responsibilities and training goes.
Wow. Now, officials with the Canadian Armed Forces, Jeff, say there's a real shortage of personnel right now. They're having a hard time getting recruits. Why do you think that is?
It's very evident to me and most of my compatriots. No equipment, no ammunition, no money to train, and no money to use your skills. They just want bodies on the ground. When you look at the last, let's say the last few operations we've done, historically, we're doing things like in Germany, in defense of the line, from the Eastern Front, that sort of thing, with a NATO, and we do UN tours and things like that. Most of our soldiers today are going off to do, what was the last thing? Clean up after a hurricane. We do a lot of civil power service now, and that's not really what I think a lot of our young men and women want to do. I know my main reason, we all say it's to serve our country, but ultimately we all got in because we wanted the excitement of travel and adventure and a challenge to our lifestyle. This new policy that the Canadian Forces has adopted with, I'm not a racist or bigot or anything like that, but you simply cannot allow the common soldier to do what they want, look how they want, dress how they want, and expect them to have the discipline to go into battle and follow orders. It just won't happen. Their whole lifestyle is based on doing what they want. How can you be a soldier in a company of infantry and be expected to do as you're told when your whole lifestyle and the whole new change is to, I can do what I want. So I'll do what I want, when I want, and there's nothing you can do about it. So that's why a lot of guys that want the adventure and the training won't join. The other aspect of it is, probably getting up to about 40% of our country are people that have come from war-torn countries. Our citizenship in Canada now are immigrants that are running from war. Why would they join a military and fight for another country? They've been through it. They lived through it as children. I think that joining the military is not a good option for kids today. Go to school, get a trade, and start a business to help us in our own local efforts.
Jeff, war is never pleasant, but some people believe it's really necessary at times. Can you talk about the importance of fighting for freedom?
Well, if we didn't fight in our veterans in the First and Second World War and Korea War didn't fight for freedoms, we wouldn't be able to have the job you want. You wouldn't be able to have the homes and the family and lifestyle that you want. You would have been told how to live, what your job was going to be. You don't have to look very far. Look at what Russia's going through, and look at what the Chinese people are going through. They don't have freedom to choose their lifestyle. They're told. And that's what You fight for these kinds of areas to rid the country and the world of these dictators that they want everything for themselves, and they're going to tell you how to best supply them with what they want.
So let me ask you something. What are your thoughts on the war right now between Ukraine and Russia, in particular the Russian invasion?
Ukraine is fighting a freedom battle right now for themselves, and dare we say it, they're fighting for the freedom of the rest of the world. Let's face it, most people know Putin's not going to stop Ukraine. If he was to get Ukraine, he won't stop there. He is Hitler too. He's just using Ukraine liberation on the east and the eastern areas of the country as liberating them and bringing them back into the Russian fold. But let's be honest, where does it stop? It's not going to stop with Ukraine. It's going to go to Lithuania. It's going to spread into Czechoslovakia and all the other countries. And he's going to get rid of the leadership in those countries. He's going to diminish the people's will to fight so that he can take it over. And do you think he's going to stop with Russia? No.
Do you think Canada should be doing a little bit more to help the Ukrainian people?
I wish Canada could do any more. Canada can't. We're tapped out. Like, as we just discussed, we can't get soldiers to join. We can't get equipment. Our procurement process is if we were to sign a contract tomorrow for guns, tanks, ships, and planes that we needed, we already know it's going to take till probably 2032 to 2035 to get that order if we signed it tomorrow. You got to realize, and most people do, the supply chain is broken after COVID, and the supply chain has been broken for war pieces and equipment for a long time. We have very few countries and very few companies that actually provide these products. Ammunition, for instance, we have one company in Canada that supplies ammunition, and even they don't have the new company, the new means of producing new ammunitions. There's very high-tech ammunition today. It's not just loading a steel casing with C4 and blowing it up. We have a lot of smart munitions and things like that. So in order to get the equipment and the ammunition we need, you're talking a 12, 15-year wait time to get it if we place an order tomorrow. It's not a throw money at it solution. We just don't have the means to produce the equipment and the ammunition that we need right now.
So Jeff, let's talk about the poppy right now. The significance, the importance of the poppy. Why should we wear one?
Well, this is one thing right now that we're going through, because we're right now in the poppy drive for Legions. We wear the poppy to show that we remember the veterans' service and sacrifice. It's not to support military. It's not to support war. And this is where a lot of the new concepts people get. We get a lot of people come up to us and say, we ask them very politely, say, notice you're not wearing a poppy. Would you like a poppy? And you're not buying a poppy. You get poppies for free. They're given. Your donation is appreciated, but not necessary. Okay. But people will say, no, I don't want a poppy. I'm not in support of the military. I don't support the military, and I don't support war anywhere in the world. So the reason for a poppy isn't that. The reason for a poppy is to recognize the past sacrifices. The reason why our veterans gave their lives was so that we wouldn't have wars and wouldn't need a military in the future. As sad as that is, it's still ongoing, and it's still a reality as we're looking at Ukraine and Russia right now.
So do you think the numbers are decreasing then, the amount of people wearing a poppy?
Yes, we've seen that historically. The amount of poppies we're getting, we're seeing people wear is diminishing. Remembrance is fading. Again, I go back to a majority, or 40% of our population has come from countries that don't even know what the poppy is. And the training aspect, or I guess the idea of the poppy doesn't mean anything to them, because to them, again, they go back to remember, well, it's tied to a war, and it's tied to something that brings pain to me, because that's why I left my country. So there's a very complicated set of emotions tied up with the poppy. So, and it's not meant that way. It's simply a symbol of remembrance, and a symbol of remembering the sacrifices that our soldiers, and not only our soldiers, but soldiers across the world made, both in war and in peace, fighting for our freedoms, as well as fighting for our civil rights, and fighting for in times of hurricanes and things like that. The soldiers do much more than fight wars.
You know, many veterans I've spoken with as well, Jeff, say it's always important to wear it on the left side, right above your heart. That's what's key when putting on a poppy. So you talked a bit about donations. The poppies are free, but people make donations. Where does the money go?
We try to keep the money locally. It goes to help local veterans. So a veteran who's living on his own all of a sudden gets crippled and can't. He needs bars by his bathroom in order to get up. He needs bars by his toilet in order for him to stand or whatever. Or he needs railings installed in his home or a wheelchair ramp or things like that. A lot of times they're living on a fixed income and they can't afford these little extra costs. Well, they can apply through the Poppy Fund to get these funds released for Poppy. So what we do is we go through a process where they go through Veterans Affairs. If they're entitled to money through Veterans Affairs and what Veterans Affairs policies can handle, they will get. And then after that, we supply them with stuff. We also supply care centers like Edith Cavell, who has veterans living there. They need a lift bed or they need a very high priced item like in the past we've bought blanket heaters for them so that their blankets they give all the people, but mostly the veterans in the homes are heated. Things like that the Poppy Fund can fund. It's all in support of local veterans though.
Jeff, let's circle back to the younger generation for just a moment now. The Gen Zs, the millennials. Do we need to do more to help our kids appreciate the sacrifices made for our freedom?
Yeah, well, it's easy to say yes, but the hardest part about the children of today, they have no connection with war. They're seeing it on TV, but it's not the same as, my father and mother went through the rubber collection times of the Second World War. Not having only, you're limited to a pound of coffee, you were limited to a pound of sugar, things that restrict your lifestyle. Our parents lived through, but my generation and the generations coming up behind me have never experienced that. And until you experience that kind of thing, you have no appreciation for what the costs are really. So the kids today are taught to remember about the war, but the connection to it is usually a gravestone. When I talk to kids in school, I usually get the whole school, like I'll talk high school and I'll get the whole school, 3 classes to stand up. And then I'll say, okay, that's the amount of soldiers that went to war. Then I'll get 2 classes to sit down and say, now the ones standing are the ones that came back. And I'll get half of that class to sit down. That's the ones that made it through the war without either loss of limb or loss of life. And it's a very impactful thing for kids.
Jeff, I understand there are close to 11,000 veterans waiting for help with their health situation as it continues to deteriorate. We also have a high percentage of homeless Canadians who are veterans. Is the government really doing enough to help our veterans?
No, the government's not. I wish the government would do as they promised, but governments at all levels, and it's not specific to any type of government or any name of government. They all make promises, they don't keep them because it costs money. And when you're going through your list of you must do, we try to placate other countries by giving third world donations to keep them happy and on the front. And it's kind of a world trade and a world give and take type thing. But you're right, we have veterans on the street that don't have a place to live. Give them a housing, supply some housing. The famous quote by Prime Minister Trudeau was, "You're asking more than we can give." I dare say, what would happen to veterans of First World War and all the wars and conflicts since if the veteran did turn around and said, "Sorry, you're asking more than we can give"? Where would we be right now? Our governments don't. Again, a government are like our children. They've had it easy. They haven't had to deal with conflicts in any way, shape, or form for a long time.
Right.
And when they do have conflicts that strike up, as they are getting pressure now to support Ukraine, they realize they dropped the ball. And like I said, it's 15 years to get the ball rolling again. And they're being told, even our own Minister of Defense is telling the nation, we just simply can't do it. We don't have the power and we don't have the equipment.
Jeff, it breaks my heart when I visit different cemeteries and I see the veterans who died, those who sacrificed their lives for us, their ages, 18, 19, 20, 21. They were just kids. It just really, I get a tear that rolls down my cheek just to see these young people who fought for our freedoms, and they had so much to live for at that time and their lives were cut short. It just really breaks your heart. Let's talk about the Remembrance Day service being held here in Lethbridge and what can people expect to see when they attend.
This year's the first year we're actually doing two simultaneous ceremonies. 20 Battery, which is the local unit down here in the airport, they are actually running the ceremony for the 11th hour at the Cenotaph by City Hall. So they are completely running that, and everything starts 10:30 for the 11th hour. And as well as we are running a ceremony at the exhibition center this year, again, the same place we always run it in the past, for the 11th hour as well. So there are two simultaneous ceremonies going on, one at the exhibition indoor and one at the Cenotaph outdoor. The Cenotaph outdoor, we've contacted 429 Squadron. They will have a Glowmaster overhead for the 11th hour. So we are having a fly past this year. As it stands now, of course, with operational commitments and the way they are, the plane could disappear tomorrow. But as it stands now, there is planned to be a fly past over the Cenotaph at 11:02.
Jeff Alden is a former member of the Canadian Armed Forces and is the manager of the Lethbridge Royal Canadian Legion. Jeff, thanks so much for joining me today from Lethbridge.
Okay, thank you very much.
You know, with government environmental mandates, electric cars are becoming even more popular. One could even suggest that EVs are making a bit of a comeback, as electric vehicles were popular in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. In fact, Ferdinand Porsche designed the first electric drivetrain back in 1898. To talk about electric vehicles in Alberta, we're joined now by William York, Director of the Electric Vehicle Association of Alberta. William, welcome to Bridge City News.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, over 100 years ago, it was European and American companies which experimented and built electric vehicles. Today, where are we seeing the biggest innovations when it comes to electric vehicle technology? Where do you think that is?
I would say leader of the pack is Tesla, and they're an American-based company. But South Korea is also pretty advanced as well.
Is it a lot of the environmental controls the governments are bringing forth? You know, they want to cut back on emissions and pollution. Is that why we're seeing such a huge increase in the manufacturing of EVs?
I think it's a multi-pronged effect. Governments are certainly pushing for it, but Tesla and companies that are leaders in the innovation space in electric vehicles, they've made it compelling for consumers. So the performance advantages of electric vehicles is also what's driving it.
I like the pun on that, what's driving it. Now, you own an EV yourself, right?
Correct. Yeah, I became an EV owner in June of 2018. I acquired a Tesla Model 3 rear-wheel drive long-range unit, and I have about 85,000 pure electric kilometers driven on that thing since then. I've driven it all the way to Seattle. I've driven it to Lethbridge in -40 from where I live in Edmonton, Alberta. I drive it everywhere I possibly can. It's my family's favorite vehicle to drive. We have two vehicles. We prefer the electric vehicle over the gas-powered vehicle every day.
You know what? I'm glad you brought up about the -40-degree temperatures. Some people have concerns about the actual range with EVs, especially when you have to have your heater on for most of the time. So how much does that actually cut the range down? Does it go maybe from down to 700, down to 350? What have you experienced?
Yeah, so let me break it down for folks. When you drive an internal combustion engine vehicle, heat is a natural byproduct of the combustion cycle process. The combustion is only about 30% efficient, so the rest is waste heat. Now, in the wintertime, that's great because you need that heat, but in the summertime, that's just energy wasted. In an EV, it's different. All the energy required for the vehicle comes from the battery, and that's a very efficient process, but unfortunately, there's not much waste heat to take advantage of in the wintertime. So your battery does need to provide that heat. What we see in the worst of the worst in Alberta is a 40 to 50% range loss. So if you're driving a conventional EV with a 400 to 500 kilometer range, you're getting, in between 200 and 250 kilometers of range per charge. Now, thankfully, we don't get too many weeks of that extreme cold in Alberta, but I have driven my EV then, and the only issue that I saw was accelerated range loss. But other than that, they're fantastic winter vehicles. The heat comes out of them just like that, just like an electric hairdryer. The heat is almost instantaneous out of one of those, and same thing in an EV. And the traction control systems are fantastic because they have very high responsiveness and precision, and that's exactly what you want in an electric an attraction control system in the wintertime.
You know, it's interesting. Some of my friends that own EVs, they actually have a combustion engine SUV that they use for driving in the wintertime. And then for the other 3 seasons, they drive their EVs. So they much prefer that, they said. Now, can you describe how battery technologies maybe changed over the last 10 years?
Yeah, so every year battery energy density improves by about 5%, which means that the amount of energy that you can store in a same size battery pack improves by 5% every year. So the technology keeps improving in that way. If you're a follower of material science and electrical engineering, you'll see that there's lots of innovation and research going into new battery technologies and chemistries, lots of tinkering in the lab to see, hey, can we get a battery with more energy density or more winter resilience? So those are always being explored. I'm seeing that lots of EVs are getting much, much better at accepting power from a fast charging station. So for instance, in the early days of electric vehicles in the 2012 era, the most a battery could accept was about 100, 150 kilowatts. Now we're seeing batteries that can accept up to 350 kilowatts. Now, I realize this is electrical speak, so when you're at a fast charging station, that's the difference from staying there for about 30 minutes down to about 5 to 10 minutes. So the amount of time that you have to spend charging at a fast charger is going dramatically down.
So how does that differ if you plug your vehicle in overnight, get that long charge as opposed to fast charging?
So level 2 charging, or what you're referring to as long charging, is what you would typically do at your home. And that's using electricity that's basically what your stove or your electric dryer would use. It's 240 volts and about 30 amps. And like you said, that's good enough for overnight. So while you sleep, your car gets fully charged, even if it's fully depleted, which isn't often the case. When you're on the road, however, or if you don't own a garage, or you don't have access to that type of electricity, you would rely on what's called a fast charging station. Now, Lethbridge, as far as I know, has, I think, 1 fast charging station, but there are many in the surrounding area. In fact, southern Alberta is quite well covered with fast charging infrastructure. But you would use one of those to recharge if you were not able to have access to a level 2 charging station.
And does that give you a full charge?
Yes, it can.
Okay. I want to chat with you a bit about some of the charging stations, as you mentioned, because I haven't seen a lot of them. I have seen a few, you're right, but how long do you think it'll actually take for the infrastructure to keep up and we can see more of these charging stations across Alberta and the country, for that matter?
Well, that is kind of a misconception. So because you can charge at home, you actually don't need as much public charging infrastructure as you do gas stations, because people can't refine gasoline in their home. They have no means of refueling their vehicle at home if they drive an internal combustion engine vehicle. So we are seeing tremendous growth in EV fast charging infrastructure, actually. Back when I was first tracking the space in 2017, there were only about 3 fast chargers in the Alberta region. Now there's well over 50 different locations. So the infrastructure has grown immensely. And there's a resource that folks can use called PlugShare. It's an app on your phone, or if you can use your laptop or computer to go to www.plugshare.com, and that'll show you all the charging stations available in Alberta, and there's much more than you think.
Kind of like Gas Buddy, when you get the app, it's like, oh, let's see what the gas stations are. And
Yeah, very similar. In fact, it even shows you the price, and many of these charging stations are free to use. And the reason for that is that businesses like IKEA will offer this as a value add service to their customers. So they're trying to lure customers from going to the Brick or some other furniture store to come to IKEA, get a little bit of a free charge, and buy something.
So, William, how would you convince somebody like me, old school, who loves my Mopar with the Hemi and that growl and that power? How would you convince me to get that electric vehicle that's so quiet, and it freaks me out when I'm a pedestrian, all of a sudden there's a vehicle right in front of me there. There's no real sound to it at all, and that power. So how would you convince somebody like me to make the switch?
Sure. So the fastest production cars on Earth now are electric. You can get an EV that will smoke any gas-powered vehicle on the road, and you'll spend, if you're looking at high-end vehicles, you'll spend about $100,000 less. So that's value proposition, right? Number one. If you like going fast, there's nothing faster than an EV. Value proposition number 2, whatever you spend on gasoline or diesel, take that and divide that number by 5 or 10, and that's what you'll end up spending in electricity. So if you like saving money, you can drive an EV. If you don't like spending a lot of money at the dealership on maintenance, you'll love driving an EV. There's no oil changes, there's no spark plugs, there's no alternator, there's no carburetor. All those maintenance costs are reduced. In the 4 years that I've owned my electric vehicle, all I've had to do is replace windshield wiper blades, washer fluid, and a couple cabin air filters. I haven't had to do any brake pad replacements due to regenerative braking. The maintenance savings are incredible.
But there is one big thing that you will have to replace. I've chatted with Tesla owners about this in the past, and that's the batteries after 8 to 10 years. And William, that's expensive. They were telling me they're fearful of the fact it'll cost them $10,000 to $15,000 to replace the batteries in this older EV. They say, you know what? It's not even going to be worth it. How do you respond to that?
Oh, it's too bad. You talk to uninformed Tesla owners. So drivetrain warranties for Teslas are up to 8 years or 200,000 kilometers, whichever comes first. But that doesn't suggest that the battery needs replacement. In fact, that's not true. I know many Tesla owners with their batteries that are older than 8 years or 10 years old, and their batteries are still going strong. The reality is that the batteries are designed to outlive the body. Tesla batteries are rated for up to 500,000 miles or more. So that's unfortunate that you got bad information from those Tesla owners. They'll find that out though once their vehicle turns 8-10 years old that their battery is still doing fine. Another thing about that too is that once their battery is no longer covered by warranty, that's a future date. And we all know that battery prices have been dropping precipitously. Back in 2012, battery pack costs were about $300 per kilowatt hour. And today they're well below $100 per kilowatt hour. And the floor is still much further away. As the supply chains ramp up, as battery manufacturers get better at manufacturing these batteries. So to say that their battery today costs $13,000 to $15,000, that may be true, but it's still covered under warranty. 8 years from now, it will no longer be. So if they do require a battery replacement, and I'm not saying that's the case, it will cost much less. And the best way to think about this is an engine on your gasoline vehicle. Those are very expensive to replace. Do they fail often? Not really. It's a very rare occurrence. It does happen, and it's unfortunate for those owners, but it's not a regular occurrence with gas vehicles, nor is it for the battery for an EV.
Yeah, I'm thinking like a gas vehicle replacement, for the motor would be between $5,000 or $6,000 for the average vehicle. If it's an 8-cylinder, 6s might be different, and 4 cylinders as well. But let's talk about the batteries themselves, William. Inside the EVs, they're heavy. Wouldn't that cause more damage to the maybe the front end components, to the suspension system, especially over time when we have a lot of potholes in our cities here in Canada?
Yeah, so it is true that the battery does weigh a bit. I was speaking earlier about the battery energy density improvements. So over time, the heaviness penalty, I guess you could say, will go away. There are advantages though to having a heavy battery. You have this heavy thing close to the ground, and that reduces the chance of a rollover. Makes your center of gravity very low, which prevents a rollover. Makes the handling of the vehicle very good. It also improves the front to rear balance ratio, weight balance ratio. So EVs have actually, due to the battery and its weight, excellent handling capabilities. And I know I did say earlier that they have less maintenance, but they're not immune to maintenance. So suspension components do wear out and they do require replacement. And we live in Alberta, there are potholes, so that is a significant risk. Yeah. But the suspension components are built for the weight of the vehicle. So the engineers at these companies, they design that into the suspension.
So I've got like I said, a Chrysler 300C with a Hemi motor in it. It's just over 4,000 pounds. How would you compare, let's say, a comparable Tesla, a full-size sedan, when it comes to weight?
So my car is about 4,000 pounds.
Okay, so it is comparable. Now, the CEO of Mercedes-Benz AG says his company is planning a new vehicle that will be an 800-volt class. How would this compare to the electric vehicles we're seeing right now in North America?
Oh, good question. So the 800 volt class is what he's referring to is the DC direct current bus architecture on the high voltage battery. The more voltage the battery can accommodate, usually the faster it can charge. So it's a good thing that the industry is moving this way. There are some pros and cons to that design architecture, but by and large, this means that Mercedes is making an electric vehicle that will be capable of very fast charging speeds, which means that when you're going on a road trip, let's say from Edmonton to Lethbridge, you'll have to stop for less of a duration for your vehicle.
William, I know in North Vancouver there's already a hydrogen filling station, and the Netherlands, a former gas pipeline producer, now carries hydrogen. Do you think that maybe EVs are just a stopgap measure between gas and diesel and hydrogen or ammonia as fuel sources?
No. So hydrogen vehicles globally, there's only about 100,000 units sold compared to electric vehicles where over 30 million units have been sold. Electricity is far more common than hydrogen. We have electricity. I have electricity in the room I'm in right now. I have electricity at home. To get the same amount of hydrogen infrastructure would cost too much. And I don't think at the end of the day, you would see the fuel cost savings that you see with going electric. So I don't see hydrogen really taking off in the passenger vehicle space. And in fact, most vehicle OEMs are not producing hydrogen vehicles, nor are they putting much money into the research and development of them. I know some are, but by and large, it's going into electric drivetrains. I don't think it's a stopgap technology. I think it's going to be the technology of the future until something better comes along, let's say nuclear. But I think EVs are here to stay, especially in the passenger vehicle market. Heavy duty and medium duty vehicles, perhaps hydrogen has more of a place because of the weight and the range requirements of those vehicles. But for passenger vehicles, for folks like you and me, it's going to be electric for sure.
William York is the director of the Electric Vehicle Association of Alberta. Thanks so much for joining us today from Edmonton.
My pleasure.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.